World of Warcraft is a game that stood the test of time. Initially released in 2004, it has gone through many changes throughout the years. August 2018 released the 7th expansion, Battle for Azeroth, the successor of what was generally considered a pretty good expansion, Legion. Yo, it's Caboose and today we're looking at World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth. It's been out for a while now and I wanted to give my thoughts on the experience as a whole. Every WoW expansion generally starts off with a pre-launch event. Battle for Azeroth's one was rather lackluster with a 30-minute questline time-gated to stretch out to 3 weeks. This was a trend we saw pop up quite a bit in Legion, like with the Surma and Broken Shore questline, and most people weren't all that happy to see it back in the pre-launch event. It was good to see Blizzard taking a serious approach to storytelling, but there was a lot of confusion with the term morally grey used in a Q&A. This resulted in a backlash by the community as there was huge speculation and hype as to who was responsible for the attack on Lordaeron and Teldrassil. Teasers and promotions of which faction started it first, but it just ended up being Sylvanas, which was everyone's original guess anyway. At least we got a whole bunch of memes out of it. You can kill us, but you can't kill World of Warcraft.
Can't I? Burn it! Burn it!
With all joking aside, along with reloading your class and doing a bunch of world quests and Darkshore for catch-up gear, there wasn't really much to do. Compared to Legion, it felt like there was a lot less effort put into it. Last pre-patch we had invasions to defend in 6 zones, transmogs and pets to collect, NPCs populated the main cities warning us of the Legion's return, and players could get debuffs that would turn them into dreadlords. Well, at least the BFA pre-patch, both the Horde and the Alliance got exclusive mount, and the Warbringer animated shorts were exciting, enriched the storytelling experience, and was done to a high standard, which I can appreciate. It's not the best start to an expansion, and with BFA releasing earlier than compared to Legion, plus having a much shorter testing period, it's hard not to assume that things were rushed to meet publisher deadlines. The overall launch of BFA was better than Draenor, but not as good as Legion. My personal experience was generally smooth with only one instance of being locked out of the game for about 5 to 10 minutes. However, people ran into different problems like character screens failing to load, quests bugging out, and server lag. It didn't take too long for these to get resolved. Overall, for a global launch, I think Blizzard did a pretty good job. Moving on to the places you'll be visiting in BFA, the Horde and Alliance split up having their own continent, which breaks up to 3 subcontinents. The Alliance get the island of Kulturas, homeland of Draenor Proudmoore, and the powerful human navy fleet that served in the Second War. The 3 parts that make up Kulturas are Drusvar, Stormsong Valley, and Terragard Sound. Drusvar has you exploring spooky forests cursed by dark magic to frozen mountain peaks and haunted human villages. Stormsong Valley takes you to lush green hills with plenty of farm and shipyards. And finally Terragard Sound, a largely mountainous subcontinent with lots of monsters to slay, pirates to defeat, and serves as the base of operations for the Alliance. The Horde on the other hand get the Zandalar Isle, which consists of Vol'dun, a harsh relentless desert that reeks of death, Nazmir, a vast swampland covered with every dangerous beast and insect you can imagine. To top it off, there's blood trolls that have pledged themselves to the blood god Kahun, and lastly Zuldazar resides the temple city of gold. Explore an expansive jungle to beach coastlines. The Horde have come to defend this kingdom from the approaching threats, as this also serves as their base of operations. Now, it's safe to say that the art department have absolutely killed it in their role of this expansion. The areas are very distinctive with their own characteristics and have some of the best music to go along with them. Despite the differences between each zones, they managed to blend in well with each other, which is a huge contrast to Legion areas. For better or worse, other than the common use of elven architecture, Legion zones often had a theme park feel to them. The new zones are much larger than any other zones created before, and there's so much detail in every corner of the map. For example, Freehold is an area in Terragard Sound where pirates have taken refuge, littered with objects that come together to give life to the area without making it feel clustered. Neutral worker type NPCs doing odd jobs, crates, barrels, food found in populated spaces, boats covered with seaweed and shells. They even added new particle effects for the air. A dungeon found in Nazmir called the Underrot, located next to a Titan research and quarantine facility. It's the player's job to purge the infection caused by the blood god Kahun. Here, we can literally see infectious spores in the air. That's immersive. The exploring aspect of the game has definitely leveled up, too bad it's ruined by a poor leveling experience. The quests themselves were nothing special. There were many times during my few playthroughs that I felt like most of the quests were the same as previous expansions with a new skin on and had been designed to have as many of them to be turned into world quests at max level. They weren't engaging at all, getting to max level took less time than any other expansion, and if it wasn't for the story and the amazing zones, the first playthrough would have not been enjoyable at all. The war campaign simply replaces the class autohaul quests and are much shorter and less rewarding. On top of that, there isn't a max level questing zone like Surima, which I actually liked in Legion. Warlords of Draenor approached leveling with a new mindset by making each zone have story chapters, giving a smoother leveling experience. Not only this, they added treasures all over the map and added unique monsters that drop interesting loot. Legion introduced level scaling, making it the first expansion where you could choose any area to start with. The quests were fun, 2 of the zones ended with a cinematic, and finishing the storyline gave you a quest to enter that zone's dungeon, which gave you a high item level piece of gear that significantly helped you to get to the minimum requirement to start heroic dungeons. There was nothing significantly new that came with BFA leveling. The Heart of Azeroth replaces your artifact from Legion with a simpler system. There was no additional skills or talents added, your secondary stat values got smaller as you leveled, legendary effects stopped at level 105, and set pieces eventually get replaced. As you level up in BFA, you get weaker. Now depending on how geared you were in Legion, the difference of power can vary, but to have that kind of experience in an RPG, combined with the fact that most classes finish loading all their abilities at level 80 and have their last talent at 100, it can really make leveling a stale process, especially if you're a new player, which is the whole reason why they added level scaling to the world in the first place. Now of course Blizzard can't just keep adding more and more abilities to our characters, and in Legion, players were given a lot of power both in-game and story-wise, so it kinda makes sense. You are the leader of your class autohaul, defender of the only known world to survive against the Burning Legion, a Titan Slayer, and then you find yourself in Kultaris killing boars because they're eating all the crops. Well, at least this way it stops the story from being just the player characters getting so strong that they eventually kill every single character in the Warcraft universe. Speaking about the story, it is definitely one of the stronger components of BFA. Blizzard released a novel called Before the Storm, which goes through the events after Legion. Sylvanas and Anduin agree to allow the humans of the Alliance to once again see their loved ones who had died and been raised as Forsaken of Lordaeron. There's also been 3 comics, one for Jaina, one for Magni, and one for the Windrunner sisters. Each comic gives us more insight of their perspectives, their relationships with other characters, and clues to what decisions they may make in the future. Combined with the storytelling from quests, the in-game cinematics, and the Warbringer shorts, BFA is clearly a narrative-focused expansion. We really haven't had this kind of storytelling in a long while. It really reminds me much of the Warcraft 3 story and how there were numerous interactions between many characters, small events that ultimately led to a big event. It makes you feel like you're a part of something much larger, and I think that's how Warcraft should feel. It should feel like a world. For the first time ever, Horde and Alliance have a completely separate story and questing experience. This was experimented in the beginning of Legion, where Horde and Alliance get to see different cinematics in the Broken Shore scenario. I'm glad to see this being taken to the next level, giving players who are invested in the story reasons to level characters on both factions. It'll be good to see more impactful story gameplay being expanded on in the future patches. Every expansion either adds a new race or class to the game, with the exception of Warlords of Draenor. BFA introduced the new allied race system where players unlock new races through reputation and quests. The current unlockable races are Void Elf, Lifeforged Draenei, and Dark Iron Dwarves for the Alliance, and the Horde, Nightborn, High Mountain Tauren, and the Magar Orcs. Kultiran humans and Zandalar trolls will also be unlockable in the next major content patch. This system allows players to have way more customizations to their own characters than ever before. Not only do they have the different cosmetic options like tattoos, different hairstyles, symbols to show what tribe you are from if you are like a Magar Orc, they also get different racial abilities which can affect the way you play your character or what professions you might take. Allied races begin at level 20 with a race specific mount, and if you level it up to 110 without a character boost, you will earn that race's heritage armor set. Blizzard are also adding these to older races and they look amazing. Big thumbs up from me on this one. The only gripe most people have is the fact that you have to backtrack through Legion content to unlock Void Owls, Lightforged Draenei, High Mountain Tauren, and the Nightborn. It's not really a big deal. I like the fact that you have to earn it for your account, and it almost somehow rewards players who play consistently, as it's something you naturally get if you play the game regularly. Playing through these quest lines and learning about these allied races creates another level of depth that really makes it feel rewarding and meaningful once you finally unlock them. They each carry some history to the Warcraft universe. Void Owls. Either way, Blizzard are making it easier to obtain the Legion allied races, so that should be good for everybody. PvP has certainly been more interesting than last expansion. Blizzard have managed to bring World PvP back from the dead with its new War Mode system. Servers are now either PvE or RP PvE servers, and players must opt in for World PvP at their capital city. I think the system is great as it separates players who want PvP from those who just want to do world content without being ganked. Now, this wouldn't work if there was no incentive to turn War Mode on, so by turning War Mode on, you gain an extra 10% bonus to EXP, gold, and war resources from quest rewards. The honor talents can now be used in World PvE content with War Mode on and have been revamped, allowing you to choose 1 trinket talent and 3 other talents with no restrictions. Legion's honor talent system made it so you can only pick 1 out of the tier of 3, and so this way it allows for a lot more different combinations of talents. Players can also fight over supplies that randomly drop on the map, and getting 10 honorable kills without dying gives the player a buff called Alliance or Horde Assassin, which increases healing and damage dealt. Assassins can also randomly get a bounty debuff, which causes you to appear on the opposing faction player's map until you die or leave the area. Killing bounties rewards conquests or honor points and drop a sack containing random valuable items. It was an amazing experience to once again have real world PvP, something that was almost non-existent in Legion. It can be incredibly immersive to be traveling the opposite faction's territory with War Mode on. It gives a real sense of danger as you could be swarmed at any point. Grouping up with friends and guildies, you're gonna have a good time. Getting a bounty debuff activates WoW's new dynamic music system, where it plays the war theme that you might hear in BGs. Plus, achievements were added. Getting 10 kills with a bounty without dying will earn you the Horde or Alliance Slayer title.
3 slain, 4 slain, 6 slain, 7 slain, 8 slain, 9 slain, and I'm done.
And nothing is cooler than receiving a special mount in the Conqueror of Azeroth title, which takes a bit of time as it requires you to get 1,000 honorable kills in all 6 zones and loot a supply drop. Honor level has been made account-wide, proper rankings had been added to arena and rated battlegrounds, 2 new arenas that fit the theme of the expansion, solid rewards you can see and work towards, but where'd that new BG and PvP vendor though? Overall, I think PvP is finally getting the attention it deserves. The revival of World PvP is great, as I think it's the easiest, most enjoyable way of getting players with little PvP experience into PvP. Unfortunately, as the expansion gets old, I've noticed less people using War Mode, and when Flying comes out in patch 8.2, I can see less people World PvPing. Hopefully Blizzard is thinking about this and comes up with more incentives. Next we have up is the Endgame Pve content. Let's just go right ahead and say that the dungeons and raids are a blast. They all carry relevance to the story, transition well into Mythic Plus, and boss fights are fun with interesting mechanics. Whether you are fighting your way through the spooky corridors of Waycrest Manor, or watching your teammates trying to get past the puzzles in Temple of Sethralis, all the dungeons are unique and add variety. Uldir is pretty decent for the first raid of the expansion, with interesting mechanics like dragging the team and boss through different rooms while dodging laser beams and fire on the fight with Mother, to micromanaging ads on the Zul boss. It's also kinda cool how you drop into the Mithrax fight, but there's always one person in the raid group that
You know that?
If there was one thing I could change about these dungeon raids, is probably the trash. World quests have made a return from Legion and is basically unchanged. Some of the minigame style ones can be pretty fun, but the only really excitement would be
a turtle made it to the water.
It's pretty much the only way to grind rep and war resources, but since there's only so many of them on the map at any given time, it's basically a time-gated rep grind. I also found that my characters would outgear the items in the emissary vendors before I had enough rep to buy them. Speaking about vendors and loot, to put it simply, the BFA Pve progression can either be...
Come on, dude! Hydro-coded. Life is pain.
Or...
Yes! Oh, I just said a fat nut!
Blizzard over the course of the expansions have made it easier to obtain gear, but can be frustrating as getting upgrades are so random and can sometimes even feel like a backhand slap when you get something you don't need, which happens quite a lot. Many posts and videos have been made about this topic. Asmongold made a video going over what he disliked about BFA. He said that Blizzard's design philosophy has changed to be based off short excitement rather than long-term fulfillment, where he used the Legion Legendary system as an example. Titan Forging is also another example of this change in philosophy, as it allows players to outgear content. Progression based on luck instead of skill can be difficult to manage, as it's hard for people to improve themselves as a player. Learning how to play a game is part of its progression system. Warfronts and Island Expeditions have its own problems too. Being advertised as core features of the new expansion, it looked good on paper. Island Expeditions are replayable 3v3 scenarios where players explore randomly generated islands for Azeroth. It was fun at first, but it got stale really quickly as it's quite repetitive. The rewards weren't that exciting, plus RNG, and the gameplay feels the same as doing all the trash of a dungeon. PvP islands are way more fun, in my opinion, but most people who even bother to do them just do the heroic difficulty and pull the whole island to get them done as fast as possible. Warfronts were another thing that looked good on paper, but turned out to be quite boring as well. A strictly PvE 20-man scenario based off the old RTS, where you can't queue as a full raid team and is ridiculously easy that the whole team would need to AFK in order to lose. It's cool how you can build these iconic structures like the barracks, Altar of Kings, and upgrading your town hall to a castle, but it's so one-dimensional. It would be great if it required players to communicate and work as a team, use actual strategy, maybe each round have the AI play differently and require different build orders. Just more variables are needed to spice things up. However, it's pretty cool how they revamped Arathi Highlands, having reasons to go back to do quests, a world boss to kill, cause then it's not just a battle for Zandala and Kulturas. Moving on to the single most hated addition to the expansion, Azeroth armor. This system essentially is supposed to make up for all the in-game progression. It was meant to replace tier sets, legendaries, the artifact weapons, and the new abilities or talents we might have gotten with the new level cap. Unfortunately, that was not the case, as most traits were boring stat buffs that don't affect gameplay whatsoever. Not only this, but the start of BFA, all generic non-class specific traits were overtuned and then nerfed once everyone spent time getting them. Legion artifacts worked in the sense that every time you leveled up, you got new traits. With Azeroth armor, you're basically leveling up to get the same ones, and it's mainly the first ring that is the most important. For instance, on the Resto Druid, there's a trait on the artifact weapon tree called Dreamwalker. This trait has a 50% chance to instantly heal players with wild growth if they already have a rejuve on them. This is an example of a good trait, as it makes players consciously think about predicting damage, which a Resto Druid has to do to some degree. It also works directly with the class's mastery, as every healing overtime effect increases the strength of all healing on that target. Another example would be the Frost Mage trait Freezing Rain. It makes casting Frozen Orb make your next blizzard instant. Like, that's the kind of gameplay changes most of us expected from Azeroth armor. Legion artifacts heavily affected the way we play our class, but with Azeroth you hardly notice it. It's also not easy to get, as anything over 340 has to either come from raids, which means you can only get the raid traits, world quests, weekly caches, and PvP rewards, but then you gotta consider RNG now. I'm also part of the group that would like Azeroth to change with spec. On the 11th of November Developer Live Q&A, Ian and Josh got a question about Azeroth armor changing with spec. Reforging has become a problem to most players. Since Azeroth armor is hard to come by and needing it to play multiple specs, some people may feel forced to pay large amounts of gold to change their traits regularly. Ian said they don't want people to reforge, hence the gold costs build up, saying that they want people who are dedicated to one spec feel like they have a small advantage over those who constantly change. Now the thing is, you gotta consider that all traits within the same ring are highly unlikely to be the best trait for that spec, and players might want sets for Mythic Plus, Raiding, PvP, Battlegrounds, Arenas. DPS might want an AoE build for Fortified Weeks and a single target for Tyrannical. Having 3 pieces for each of those sets, it takes up a lot of bag space. Making Azeroth armor able to change with your spec just like class sets would be very beneficial, and I feel like it won't really affect the dedicated single spec users because you're always going to choose the best pieces for your main set anyway. It's fair to say that most games released nowadays do come with its share of bugs, but holy crapado was BFA buggy. The release of 8.0 led to servers going down because of the new community system, world scaling wasn't done completely right with some items or monsters being completely overpowered while others were too weak, class balancing was completely destroyed, and old content was too difficult to solo. Blizzard managed to fix most of the major ones in a burst due to players complaining. But to this day, BFA is still unpolished as bugs still need to be fixed. For example, some angles of buildings would turn your screen into a completely light blue color. You're probably thinking like, who cares, right? It's not a big deal. Okay, try this one. So this one time, the siege unit bugged out during a warfront, basically making it impossible to finish. No? Okay, we were doing a 12 freehold on the second week of the Mythic Plus release. It was difficult enough, but the shark puncher had a bug where the shark stayed after wiping, making it hard to tell what sharks were real.
Screenshot him. Screenshot.
Yeah, dude, wait, can we get a picture with the team?
Yeah, I should have to get a picture of the team.
And we also can't forget about the enemy forces delivery service.
Oh, it's BP.
Huge. What the fuck? Whoa.
My guildies have ran into bugs in all kinds of dungeons. With all these things like the lame pre-launch event, the lack of interesting Azerite armor traits, and the problems with scaling at the start, helpful advice was given to Blizzard during beta it wasn't used. I just can't help think that BFA was an unfinished product. Hope is not lost. With the end of BlizzCon 2018, there were many announcements in the upcoming patches. Azerite gear vendors, an added Azerite ring, new season traits, Ilo Fuyahara Azeroth gained from rep as account wide, more heritage armor sets, a new warfront and heroic difficulty, more islands with more mechanics, a new faction based raid, island incursions which should be similar to Legion invasions, movement abilities taken off the global cooldown, new Worgen and Goblin models, 2 new zones for 8.2. Seriously, there's a lot of changes coming to BFA and I really hope they are done well. The WoW community is full of passionate gamers who want WoW to succeed. Although it's not as popular as it used to be, those who are still playing do very much care about this game, and with Classic being announced next year, I'd expect a lot of returning players coming back to relive those days. Hopefully learning to appreciate both Classic and Retail WoW. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you again.
Man's dead. How we gonna take the rare sickness?